You can go on.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Women's History panel. We thank each of you for joining today's panel discussion, where we are celebrating and elaborating on the essential role of women in American history and today. I also want to take a moment as Southern University celebrates 142 years and honor the women who made Southern University what it is today. While I cannot call each by name, I ask that you take a moment and honor the memory of those, such as Dr. Dolores Spikes, Ms. Camille Shade, who we have a room named after in our library, and so many others whose shoulders we build upon. I am Dawn Ventress Kite, Dean of Libraries at Southern University. Let's take a moment of silence and remember those who led before us. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I will turn the program over to today's event organizer, Librarian Maya Banks, as we move into discussing the theme of this year's Women's History Month celebration, which is providing healing and promoting health. And we know women have been doing this for such a long time. Let's discuss. Take it over, Mike.
Thank you, Dean Kite. I'm so happy to have with us today our moderator, Dr. Robin Merrick, who is Vice President for External Affairs and University Relations for the Southern University System. She provides oversight to the areas of communications, governmental relations, special events, and the Southern University Museum of Art. Robin was previously
We'll ask you to mute as you join in, or we'll have to mute everybody. Please, I think Mr. Hughes, your sound is coming through. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin previously served as the SU System Chief of Staff and as the Director of Alumni Affairs for the university. She's hosted the university's radio show Inside the Southern University System and is former editor of the Southern University System magazine. She is a Southern University graduate, holding degrees in business administration, public administration, and a doctorate in public policy. She has conducted research in the areas of women's studies as it relates to women in government and historically Black colleges and universities. She served on numerous boards, including as chair of the board of directors for the Girl Scouts Louisiana East, chair of the board of directors for the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, and chair of the board of directors for volunteers in public schools. She is currently serving on the board of directors for WRKF Public Radio, the Arts Council of Greater Baton Rouge, and the Foundation for East Baton Rouge Parish Schools. Robin was named as one of the Business Report of Greater Baton Rouge's influential women in business in 2019. Robin is committed to public service and volunteerism with more than 35 years of experience working with religious, civic, and nonprofit organizations, including Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Links. I want to thank her publicly now for agreeing to serve as our moderator today. And I can tell you that she's one of the kindest people that I know, and she is all about women's empowerment. Without further ado, I present to you Dr. Robin Merrick. You can take over now.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here with everyone today. I know we're not in person, but I think we've gotten accustomed to this hybrid world now that we're opening back up. So it's very good to see faces, even pictures of several of you and names across the screen joining us today. And Dean Kite, I certainly want to thank you and the John B. Cade Library staff for all that you are doing as we're celebrating Founders Day, our Founders Month here at Southern University, and also Women's History Month. This is a special time for us, and I really appreciate how you brought together the women in the history of Southern University who've helped to bring us to where we are today. And there are numerous women, and I would love for us to sit and have that conversation about how we can highlight those women in history of Southern. So our theme today, women providing healing and promoting hope. I thought about that some, healing and hope, and how we work to provide and promote what we do here as women, as individuals. And I know there's some men who are joining us as well. So we hope that you'll walk away with some takeaways for you as well in our conversation. We have some very amazing panelists joining us today, and I'm excited to be with them and to call them colleagues of mine. We have staff members here, administrators at the university, as well as our students. And we have one member who is joining us from the community at large. I'm not certain if she's on just yet, but I would like each of you to introduce yourselves as we go through before we start our conversation on healing and hope and how we are working to provide and promote that within ourselves and within our networks and within the larger community. So Dean Kite, we'll start with you first as our Dean of Libraries, newly minted Dean of Libraries, and we're glad to have you. Just a quick introduction rather of yourself.
More than that, I'm a slightly deaf, but not terribly deaf.
Right here.
Hello again. We will ask that you please mute yourselves as you come online. And again, I welcome you. I am Dawn Kite. I have been the Dean of Libraries now officially for 1 year this March, I believe, acting about a year before then. But I'm really pleased that we are doing this panel today. And I'll probably discuss a little later about all of the resources the library has available to those, which should be all of us who are interested in promoting our health. And I'll talk a little bit about health literacy and how the library participates and promotes that area. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Dean Kite. Thank you so much. Dr. Cynthia Bryant is joining us as Dean of the College of Humanities and Interdisciplinary Studies. Dean Bryant.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I am, as Robin indicated, I am the Dean of the College of Humanities and Interdisciplinary Studies. I'm a 1992 graduate of Southern University, which seems like a really, really long time ago, but that's okay. I've been around for a while. I have been Dean for 5 years. I've served as an English professor for, gosh, it's been almost 27 years, it seems. I've been, like I said, around for a while, and I'm very happy to be here because although I was looking at some of the ideas that are going to be prevalent during this panel. I'm not a frontline caregiver, but this pandemic has been very difficult. And if you are an administrator, or if you're in a leadership role, you are a caregiver. So I'm very happy to be here to talk about healing. And that's all.
Thank you, Dean Bryant. Very glad to have you. Next up is Dr. Valerie Irvin. She serves as director of the Southern University and A&M College Counseling Center.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Robin. I too am really happy to be here. As the director of the Counseling Center, my staff and I, we are frontline workers, and I think that this is a very timely discussion. I too am also a two-time graduate of SUBR. My undergraduate degree was in '77, and I got my master's here as well in 1981, and came back in 1998 at the pushing of one of my former professors, who's no longer with us, and became director of the Counseling Center. And so I actually came in and redeveloped our Counseling Center. And so this August will be my 24th year.
Fantastic, Dr. Irvin. That is fantastic. Thank you for that. Miss Latavia Roberts, she serves as the president of the SU Association of Women's Students. Miss Latavia, are you with us? I don't see her. And she may be
She
joining.
just disappeared. She was right in the bottom right box and then went out.
Okay, Latavia, if you sign back in, we will certainly circle back to you. Next up is Miss Leilani Robinson. She is a graduate student here at Southern University, majoring in public policy. Ms. Robinson, are you with us? I don't see Miss Leilani, and she may be coming back. If you all see Miss Latavia hopping back on, just let me know. I'll be looking for her. Our next panelist, or our final panelist, is Siobhan Arlen Bradley. She is the founding principal of REACH, Beyond Solutions, LLC. It's a public health policy advocacy, faith, and executive leadership firm. And I know Ms. Siobhan had indicated she may be a few minutes late. Ms. Siobhan, are you on? Okay, we don't see her. So we're going to jump right into some of our questions. And as
Excuse me, Dr. Derek, Latavia is
Latavia
back.
is here.
fantastic. There you are, Miss Latavia Roberts. Good afternoon. Are you outside? You are outside. Very
Yes, I am. Yes,
perfect.
the
Perfect.
internet is going. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivia Roberts. I am a senior majoring in fashion merchandising here at Southern University, and I also have the pleasure of serving as the 2020-2021 Association for Women Students president. And I'm so grateful for the invitation to be on this panel list with all of these amazing women. And thanks for having me.
We're very glad to have you, Ms. Roberts. We love to hear from our students, and we love to engage with our students on all sorts of issues, and this being a very critical one right now, as many say that we've come through the pandemic. Others are saying we're still in the pandemic. Some of us are just like, we don't know where we are. We're just getting up every morning and just trying to push through and make the best of each day. So again, thank you to our panelists. And if Leilani and Siobhan join us, please let me know so we can circle back and introduce them and certainly weave them into our conversation today. Okay, first up, I'm going to start our first question just about challenges that we've all faced over this last, what is now a 2-year period here, especially in Louisiana, with the first case being March of last year for us. And we've circled around for a full 2 years of dealing with the pandemic. So I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Irvin and Dean Cade, if you would. What are the challenges faced by caregivers and frontline workers during this ongoing pandemic? And I want to, before you answer, go back to something that Dean Bryant mentioned. She said that she wasn't a frontline worker, but I think at some point, if you were employed here at the university, we were very much frontlining. So we never really stopped during the pandemic. And that was important for us to say that here in higher education, that we really didn't stop. So I'm going to dub everyone as a frontliner, because at some point you were doing something that was on the front line. So back to the question, the challenges faced by caregivers and frontline workers during this ongoing pandemic. And Dean Cade, we'll start with you.
Thank you. I'll start off with one issue that I know I faced as coming into this deanship while the pandemic was going on. There was an issue when the students had to leave the campus, and some students didn't have the proper equipment to continue their education and access what was needed. So there was a challenge of how does the library meet the need during the pandemic? We are always a source to all of our students and faculty where they can come and access technology and access resources. But now all of a sudden, our universe is shut down. So what do we do? So as the leader, I was faced with how do I respond to my administration who's asking, we need the library to remain open to make sure our students can continue their education. However, I'm dealing with my staff and faculty who want to be at home with their families and making sure that they're safe and protected from this virus. So a great challenge was balancing home work life. We want to make sure we're meeting the needs, the educational needs of our students, but I also believe our human resources are our best resources, and we have to take care of them. So that was a great challenge that I learned to that was thrust upon me very early in my leadership time as the dean, and we handled it. We handled it as a team. We talked together, and we made sure that everybody was doing self-care and taking care of their families and themselves, but also making sure that our students had what they needed. So sometimes that meant we had to get together, work half of the night together to mail laptops off to people, put them in the mailbox and ship them off, take appointments to meet them here, we worked with the physical plant, make sure the shields were put up because we were only one of 2 libraries that remained open during that period because we want to make sure our students and faculty had the resources they needed. So I'll definitely say the challenge of balancing work life, home life, and just trying to make sure everybody stayed safe and secure while we still met the mission of our institution.
No question, Dean Cade. We would see driving onto the campus during the shutdown, at the height of the shutdown, there was no one here, but cars were at the library. So there's no one around here, but somebody's at the library at all times. And that included our employees and our students as well.
Yes.
And Dr. Irvin, I want to tap into that portion of the pandemic where while we shut down initially and we asked our students to return home, there were quite a few students who could not return home.
Absolutely.
So in that
Absolutely.
challenge conversation, would you address that portion as well?
Yeah, I certainly echo what Dawn has shared. And I will also confess that I was one of those individuals calling her, asking for assistance for laptops for students and information that we could utilize virtually. But access was a major, major concern and issue for us. When we were told around March 15th, we were shutting down, we were scrambling to figure out how we were going to continue to provide therapy and counseling services to students who were involved in those services, but they had to leave. And many of our students returning home did not have proper access, if you will. So either connectivity was an issue, privacy might have been an issue. I honestly had therapy one morning with a student in the closet because that was the only place she could go to have any privacy. And we weren't absolutely sure she was private. So privacy, confidentiality, access. I had students and I was making the recommendation that they drive to Starbucks or any coffee house, any place they could pick up Wi-Fi. And for most of our students, they managed to come through with what they needed to do in order to continue therapy services. And for a whole year, we were lucky in that the boards who license us allowed us to see people across state lines, which ordinarily is unethical and illegal. And so I personally had students in Illinois. And for that year, I was good to see that student. But when the boards started to pull back on the waivers they were offering us, it became problematic again, because you had students out there who might have wanted to stay in therapy or counseling, and we could not see them because they were across state lines. And so one of the things the library helped us out with as people began to come back to campus, I actually got laptops through Dawn's office to ensure my folks would have access at home. And so when students came back to campus, we made an arrangement
where she would allow them to have privacy, I think on the 3rd floor of the library. They could go in and ask for that floor, say nothing more about why, but they were allowed to go in, set up with a laptop from the library, connect to us here in the center. So we were in the counseling center, but not allowing people to come in at that point. And so I think nationwide access was a huge, huge issue for people. One of the other things I want to share that, you know, we've heard quite a bit about in terms of frontline individuals who are physicians and nurses and in that field. You might recall what New York City did for a while. At 7 p.m., I think it was, they would come out to their windows and everybody would clang pots and pans just to say thank you. Because what was happening was that people were flooding these facilities and no one was getting rest. And so you think about, oh yeah, that's what they sign up for, but they are human. And at some point, you begin to absorb some of this hard work and grief and loss that you're experiencing. And then you have to figure out how to kind of recenter yourself. So I think looking at remembering what the shortages were about is really major, because many people sacrifice their health physically because they were trying to be there for other folks during the beginning of this pandemic.
Absolutely. Dean Brian, I want to ask you a question. We talked a bit about the challenges that we are facing during this pandemic, but one of the challenges has been the influx of media attention on the pandemic itself. And in the beginning, remember, we were hearing things, and I'm directing this question specifically to you because you've got the media area in your academic shop over there. You are a writer by training, but even still, we were hearing, you know, wash your groceries, don't wash your groceries, wash your hands for 30 seconds, wear gloves, don't wear gloves. Just the constant information that was being pushed out. Talk to us about the challenge that people may have experienced, because it was information overload.
Yeah, it certainly was. And not only was it information overload, but there was a lot of distrust regarding the information that was being presented. I know in my home, where I live with my family, there was a lot of confusion about what to do, you know, what needs to be washed, what doesn't, you know, washing your hands. Do you, when you go out, do you wash your clothes immediately? Or, you know, do you feel guilty because you were in someone's presence and you didn't have your mask, you forgot your mask? Speaking of masks, initially we were told we shouldn't even have masks, and then it changed. I mean, the information was so, it added to the alarm as far as I'm concerned. And I think that this is one of the reasons why, you know, as the dean of this college, as a mother, as a wife, there was just so much confusion in dealing with the fear that much of this, I feel, instigated, just not knowing what to do, has created the aftermath that we are still experiencing with a lot of violence, domestic violence. I mean, just lots of things are happening that I believe, and Dr. Irvin could probably speak to that better than I can, but I think it's the result of all that we have been through from the very beginning, with the confusion and the fear and watching the news and the news overload. I literally stopped watching the news, the television, period. I started watching just, you know, when I had the time, watching reruns of things or watching something on Netflix, because I couldn't handle it. It was just too much to take in, all of these people dying, and there was nothing I could do. And I will end with that, feeling helpless. You have all this confusion, you have all this information, and it's just you. You don't know what to do to make things right for anyone. That's a lot to take in at one time.
Yeah, that's a very good word to add to our mix here, just feeling helpless. Helplessness that went on during this time, and to some degree, the helplessness that still continues, and the effects of that. What are the impacts of that? I see that I think we lost our student again, and I really wanted to ask her thoughts on this very subject. And I will take this moment, though, to do two things. One, remind you to mute your line if you are not speaking. And also, if you have questions that we don't touch on, please add them to the chat box. We're going to try to get to questions at the end of our conversation, and we may be able to weave some of them into the conversation. So I would encourage you, if you have a question, burning question, and you don't hear us talking about it, then put it in the chat box. Latavia, you're back. Hello. I hope you heard some of the conversation. Wanted to get your take on the challenges that were experienced, especially we talked about frontline workers, but I want to hear it from a student's perspective. We think we know some of the challenges that you all were facing, but we didn't walk in your shoes at this time, and we didn't have this happening when we were in college. So challenges from the perspective of a student.
Definitely, I can personally relate to having to go through from our normal way of doing things to everything being virtual. My first year as a student leader was virtual, unfortunately. So I'm used to doing on-campus event planning, on-campus things like that. But most of our events for the first year were virtual. And, you know, coming into something where you've seen everyone before you be able to do these different experiences, and then you're like, oh man, I'm not able to do it. I'm gonna make the best of it, but I wish that I was able to have that experience like everyone else. But the plus side about it is now that things are beginning to get back to its normal operations, we are able to do those few things that students were missing back in before, you know, the whole pandemic and things like that. But me personally, going from home, like the therapist was saying, for some students, and I can relate to that, going home wasn't really an option because I'm 7 hours away from home. So imagine you're on campus and then you get an email saying, oh, we have to move out by tomorrow. And I'm like, I don't stay down the street. I stay 7 hours away from home. So I'm sure a lot of students, you know, it was a very interesting and difficult transition. But luckily we were able to, you know, use those resources that were virtual and still be able to prevail and proceed with life. And now that we're able to do things on campus, I'm sure we will always look at that experience as a blessing in disguise. So
Indeed. Yeah, I do wonder what history is going to say about this some 10, 20, 30 years as we look back on this time. So thank you for that perspective. And while I've got you, Latavia, I want to ask you something else about this experience, especially as not just a student, but a student leader, as you said. What's been some of the things that have been most rewarding for you during this time?
So as I mentioned before, my first year as a student leader, I was on the AWS cabinet. So I did more of like the planning and things like that. But now being in more of a leadership role as like the president, it was very not challenging, but it was a good challenge because I needed that pressure to be able to handle not just my personal life, my academic life, but also the extracurricular as being a student. And as I said before, I was never thrown into the water of doing anything on campus because my first experience as a student leader was virtual. So this was my first year having to submit building requests. This is my first year having to talk to different advisors and faculty and them knowing my face and my name because I was so on them. Hey, can you do this for me? Can you do this for me? And in the beginning, it was very challenging because I'm like, I hope these people don't think I'm annoying, but I think that this position really taught me that if I need to get something done, I can't be lazy and I can't slack because that person, when I graduate, they're gonna be like, I'm Latavia. She was emailing me like crazy, but she made sure she got her job done. So that was really the biggest highlight as being a president, just being able to not only inspire my peers, but also just be the leader that I hope that future generations can look back at my leadership.
Good deal, good deal. Dr. Irvin, coming back to you on the notion of rewarding. The work that you do, the work that you and your counselors do in the counseling center, what has been some of the most rewarding experiences that you've had and that your team has had during this time?
I think rewarding felt like simply being able to connect with students wherever they were initially. And then like everyone else on campus, we got the plexiglass put in, and I think I have it everywhere in my office. And so we actually came back to the office that January. I think generally when I think about my work and the reason I do it, I see it as having the opportunity to plant seeds And sometimes I'm lucky enough to see the seeds actually bloom and flourish and move on. And other times I don't get to see that because students move on and move away. But I hear back enough from former students that when something happened in their life, they heard my voice in their head and they thought, now what would Dr. Irvin say? And would then move from that place. And so that's just really great that I think in this field, we get the chance to work with young people who are going through all of the developmental stages. And when you're really, really lucky, you really do get to plant some really good seeds, and those seeds will grow. And so I really appreciate, and I tell students when I'm working with them, it's important to be intentional about why you're in college, what your major is, and why you have selected that major. Because this is something, hopefully, you're going to be doing for a very long time in your lifetime. And you want to be able to get up and be joyful about doing it. I mean, you're going to have tough days, everybody does, but your tough days should not be the majority of what's going on with you. And so I think it's really important to be intentional about why you're doing what you're doing, because this can be, mental health work can be very hard work. I mean, I think of us as being the holders of other people's pain. And sometimes that can become overwhelming for you. And so, you know, it's really important. People have touched on balancing and self-care. It's very important to have ways that you self-care, because if you're not taking care of you, you aren't gonna be able to continue to kind of feed into other people. So I love what I do. I mean, I was one of the lucky ones. I was intentional about it. And I've been trying to think about retirement, and it kind of like saddened me sometimes. I hope my staff, I mean, I have seen a difference in some of the younger people coming into the field. And I think that's just a factor of where we are in the world right now. I think my ideas about work are very different from some of my younger staff members.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Irvin. I see that Miss Arlen Bradley has joined us. Are you there, Siobhan? There you are. Hello.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Glad you're here. We would like to back up just a moment and allow you to introduce yourself. We gave a brief introduction of what you represent, but if you would say a word or two.
Sure.
I think
On
you
Zoom with you
froze on us a second.
in Maryland.
Okay, you're freezing on us a little bit. Can you hear us okay? And you're back on mute. Okay, Miss Arlen Bradley, we're going to come back to you in just a bit. We can address the technical challenge there. We'll move on to next set of questions. A little bit more about just how we go about providing healing and hope. Actually, how is that happening? What are the ways that what are we doing either in our professional walk or our personal walk with our families and our friends that we can really provide this healing and this hope? And I'll start with you. I want to go back to you, Dr. Bryant, our Dean of our Humanities and Interdisciplinary Studies.
Mhm.
Dean Bryant.
Oh, wow. Okay. So healing and hope. You know, the first thing I want to say is that I think that what I did personally, this idea of juggling is very serious for me. One of the things that happened with the onset of this pandemic is that my worlds collided. Okay, so I'm very good at compartmentalizing. I have my work life, I have my home life, you know, I have my life as a daughter, my life as a mom, my life as a dean, as a professor, everything is compartmentalized. And what happened was that everything just collided for a year. Everyone was at home. The kids were at home. My husband was at home. I was at home, but my students were at home because I taught a little bit during that period, via this virtual space. But, I think that whatever I do as a healer was compartmentalized, and it was very difficult to do all of those things at the same time, to be present for my family, to be present for my colleagues, the faculty, to be present for my supervisors, to be present for everyone. That was very difficult. And so it's hard for me to say, what I did in terms of healing, except I did not stop. That's all I can say. I made sure that everyone's needs were met, which brings me to the next thing that I'm sure you're going to talk about is self-care. That I have not mastered. So I'm working on that. My problem is that I do make sure that everyone's needs are met. I believe in healing. I believe in hope. And I'm very good at instilling hope in people just through the word. It's going to be all right. Just keep going. One of the best things that happened professionally was watching some of my colleagues who did not believe that they could teach online, figure it out. That was amazing. And it was rough at the beginning. It really was, but to see them embrace it, and yes, I can do Moodle. Yes, I can, add these students. Yes, I can grade. Yes, I can do everything technologically in a way that I've never had to. For me, that was one of the highlights of being a leader in this college. I don't know. It's hard for me to answer that because I don't see myself as a healer. I see myself as a sustainer. So maybe there's healing in that. I keep things going. Okay.
I would argue in a very affirmative way that because you kept things going, some onlooker received hope and healing by watching you.
I do hope so.
One could walk away with that because you didn't crumble. You continue to move on. And so often, I think many people are walking around with the appearance that they have it all together, when little do folks know that perhaps they do not. But you're giving someone that inspiration to say, hey, they look like they've got it going on. They've got it all together. I think I can do this too.
Yeah.
So
I would only add to that, Robin, Dr. Merrick, that one of the things that I've also taken from this situation, from this moment in our lives, is reminding my colleagues that they too, just like you said, we walk around and we seem like we have it together, reminding them that this pandemic has taken a toll on them, and it probably is affecting how they interact with their own families, how they interact with their students. So lots of those grievances that I got during this pandemic, some of it was everyone reacting, the students and the faculty, to this pandemic and not knowing what to do, going back to that helplessness again. And so just reminding people to just be patient with yourself, be patient with your students. Before you respond to something, think about, what is making me respond this way? Why am I saying this? When I grade this, am I looking at the full picture of what's happening? Like, having to continue to remind my colleagues of that, I think was helpful. I really do. Because we don't sit down, if we don't catch COVID, if we don't know anyone who has passed from COVID, we don't really think that it's affecting us. It's someone on television, but it's all indirect, but it's very powerful, and it is affecting us.
Absolutely.
So that's all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dean Bryant. Ms. Siobhan Arlen Bradley, I'm thinking.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now. Got your message. Thank you.
I apologize. Good afternoon. I had internets blocking each other. I'm Siobhan Arline Bradley. It is an honor to be with you all today. I have the privilege of sitting in for my mentor, Dr. Cheryl Taylor. I was a 21-year-old fresh out of Tulane University senior when I ran into a woman who would change my life. And I know that she had a few health concerns and so needed to miss today. But excited to be here to join you. I'm the president of Reach Beyond Solutions, which is an LLC firm that advances health equity in all sectors. And I'm also a minister. I'm a Master of Public Health from Tulane University and also a Master of Divinity from Virginia Union University. So I am excited to talk about women's healing from the context of the public health infrastructure and understanding how humanity and public health are supposed to be synonymous. But as we know, as we serve, particularly Black women in this country, we understand that there is a tension between public health and health outcomes and the way that we deliver public health. So I'm excited about the discussion and looking forward to engaging on this conversation around literacy and healing.
And Ms. Arline Bradley, I'm going to come right back to you on a question. So look, so unmute again. Unmute. We're glad to have you on board with us today. And there's so much that we would like to talk about. But one of the things you touched on a little bit in terms of the public health intentions and public health outcomes and where that is, what are some of the types of ethical and social issues that you feel that we've been experiencing during, before, and even after, I should say, this pandemic, during, before, and what we're calling now is after? We're not quite out of it, but we're kind of in that space where we feel as though we're out of it.
You know, it's so interesting. I sit in a seat where most of the country was asking, who are public health people? And prior to the pandemic, no one even knew where the health department was unless they were traveling to get a vaccine to go abroad. But as you think about ethical issues, one of the things that I have found and social issues is that the social determinants of health that we talk about in every university in this country were exacerbated in a way that the entire country was able to witness. When you talk about access to healthcare, education, income, housing, we have been researching this for years. I was the project manager on one of the first REACH grants from Dr. David Satcher, right? So we've been talking about disparities forever, but what we found was that social issues now had a different name because of technology and because of a pandemic that really exposed where the country's healthcare system has been going, which is advancing sick care and advancing corporate need. And so now that we're in this public health infrastructure mode, this idea of prevention and protection has always been at odds with where the country has been going. You talk about ethics. I mean, the ability to access PPE, the ability to access healthcare in the middle of a pandemic, the ability to access education online. I mean, what we found, and I'm a mother of an 8-year-old. So in the pandemic, my child was in kindergarten. I needed prayer and more prayer at that time. But what I found was that I had access and many of my colleagues did not, which leaves an entire population lagging behind in being able to attain core standards, one, but then also being able to attain some of the basic healthcare needs that were out there. And I feel that as a public health infrastructure, what we are finding now is that we have a new set of advocates who are pushing in this social space. There's now a political context. So social for me is also political. The political context is, where do we now advocate for appropriations to begin to invest in infrastructure so that my nurses actually have places to work that are able to be able to do the things they need to do on the ground clinically, that our physicians, that our MPs, that our social workers are now a part of a full-blown workforce. So the ethical issues were always there. They were just exacerbated in the way that the country now sees and understands. And when you see an administration that we had before say the word social determinants of health, we know that we found a common area of support to be able to advocate for.
I was muted. Thank you. Thank you for that. Really bringing home some conversations that we need to continue to have. This is not going away. You talked about the pandemic really exposed the nation, and I think to some degree it exposed the world even, although those things are not as, in our face as much with the world, but we're seeing that, the fact that the US has gotten so far advanced with its delivery of vaccines, where many countries are still struggling there. So this is becoming a really huge issue for not just our country, but just the world in general as we see it. So I want to go into our next line. We touched on it a bit. Dr. Bryant touched on it a moment about self-care. What are we doing as individuals, as women, as daughters, as sisters, as friends, as wives, what are we doing to take care of ourselves? And I'll start with you, Dean Kite. What are we doing to take care of ourselves? What are you doing specifically?
Yes, I said I can speak personally. I love to meditate. Prayer. My faith is extremely important to me. So whenever I feel any tension, any stress, I'm definitely going into meditation. I'm going to prayer because that is what calms me. It settles me, so I don't scream and holler and just go off the bat and go crazy, I meditate, I pray, and I think it's very important. And I encourage that to my colleagues who I work with in the library and those I speak with, just get to a calm place. My mother always told me, you can do anything as long as you know you don't have to do it forever. So if I'm dealing with a situation and I continue to say, this is just the right now, this is what I'm dealing with right now, this will not be forever, I can deal with it. I can deal with it because I know it won't go on forever. So definitely meditation, seeing my physicians, my trained doctors, physicians, talking with my family members, church members, other people who I feel like there's trust and that I can speak with. Communication is so important. And I definitely believe in not only the talking part or speaking of communication, but also being a listener. Listening is good for self-care. Just hearing other people talk about what's going on in their lives. Reading, of course, I'm a librarian, and so I love to read. So definitely reading for relaxation, reading to learn more, reading so I can be able to share relevant information. All of those are extremely important to me for self-care, just making sure that I'm well enough so that I can be able to help, support, lead, not only be with my family, my husband, my kids, but also all of those around me who I deal with on a daily basis. And I also encourage that with the students. During this pandemic, I want to acknowledge the work of Vanessa Eli, who is on the phone, along with some others, who we started this Student Library Advisory Council. Of course, we started it so we could hear more from students about what they want from their library, but it also gave them an opportunity to just talk, communicate, especially and it started during the pandemic. So being able to talk, communicate, share what's going on. And as I said before, for me, meditation and prayer, those are just keys for myself, for self-care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Kite. I think too, when we think about communication, we don't often put it in its proper place. We communicate a lot. We're texting, we're on social media, but some of this is, are we really communicating with people? Are we in person? Are we on the phone? So much has become electronic that we're not as touchy-feely anymore with our communications. And so I think that's important as well for us to consider. And Dean Kite, you talked about being there for your students and even having a place for students to come and communicate and voice their concerns with the library and even communicate with one another. I definitely want to move over to Latavia, Ms. Roberts, for you to share your self-care practices as the youngest person on our panel, I think. What are you all doing at this level for self-care to make sure that you're balancing all of the demands of work and school and play and so forth?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I was really hoping that you asked my take on this same question. But as far as a student, I'm a senior, so I'm still getting my life together, but not all the way together. So I try to show myself as very vulnerable and very accessible to not only just the students on campus, because I lead an all-female organization, but also just for myself and holding myself accountable. And one of my main things and go-tos when it comes to self-care is journaling. I like to journal. I like to write down how my day was for that day, how my day could have been better for that day. And when I release all of those thoughts and of those stresses that I had during the day, I just feel so much better after journaling. And definitely prayer. That's another big thing that helped me not only get through college, but also helped me get this position that I have. And as far as a president, I try to implement, different programs to allow the students to have a safe space and be able to communicate as you all were saying with not just me as the president, but also their fellow peers. And I know yesterday we had a really great girl talk event talking about self-care, talking about releasing those things because it's midterm season. And the ladies were just saying to have those moments to where come out, get some snacks, just be like, hey, I'm really struggling in this class. And then another girl could be struggling in that class. So just allowing to have those outlets and those important conversations with others are very important when it comes to self-care. But thank you so much for that question.
That's great. Self-care has really moved beyond the kinds of things like getting a pedicure or a manicure or a massage. You know, it's going to be deeper than that. And Latavia, I would also say if you're journaling, you know, what I find is so rewarding is to go back months later or years later and read back over what you wrote. It's phenomenal. I have a year's worth of journals that I go back and look and say, wow, I was thinking that, or look how far I've come, or maybe I haven't come far as far as I'd like. But journaling and reflecting back on those things that you've written, I think is also important. I would love to hear from you, Dr. Bryant, about your self-care, since you tipped us off in this direction a little while ago. What are you doing for self-care?
What am I doing for self-care? Well, I don't actually have a self-care regimen, with the exception of spending time with my children. And I say that as a very intentional act because I'm very, very busy. At least I feel like I'm always busy. So just taking time, especially with my teenage daughter, my youngest one, to get her off of her cell phone and off of her iPad, and just to sit down and talk with her about what it's like to be a middle schooler during this time. Getting my son, I have a teenage boy, just keeping him near me and listening to what's happening. Honestly, those are my self-care regimens to bring my family together, to make sure that at least once a day, everybody sits down at the dinner table, no electronics. And we have, even if it's just 5 minutes where we ask what happened, just to get people to continue connecting, because it feels like we're always moving and running and shifting and all of that. And I don't like feeling disconnected from them because they are what keep me grounded. And so, but beyond that, I wish I had a self-care regimen where I could, like, I love that Dean Kite meditates. I've tried that. I can't get my mind to be still long enough to meditate. I'm working on it. I read and I dream about traveling. Those are the things that I do. Okay. So there you go.
I like to dream about traveling. So jot that down so we can get you on a trip somewhere for sure. Dr. Valerie, I would think that this is something you preach in your counseling sessions, that self-care is important, that right after you go through having your conversations with our students, that somewhere in there you're saying to them, you've got to have self-care.
Absolutely. And we encourage them to do everything everyone has spoken about. We actually have journal sheets in the wait area. And so we have students take those, and at the end of the day, of their day, just reflect for a few minutes and write down what they feel they either struggle with that day and what came as a reward for them. And so journaling is extremely important. And like you, Robin, personally, I think I have decades and decades of journals, and I do enjoy going back and rereading to see where I've been and where I think I am and what goals I might be projecting. I do practice self-care. I have an appointment every 6 weeks with my masseuse. I try my best not to miss it, because that is my little hour to be on her table with the hot stones and getting the stuff out of my head. And so, Cynthia, I'm going to have to work with you to get stuff out of your head so you can just decompress. Because I do think if you're constantly, and professors do this, many of you, you're constantly putting into your students. I see that because they come to us. And so I know there are some who are really, really trying to put into the students. Well, if you're not replenishing yourself, at some point you're going to burn out. And you don't want to get to burn out. One of the things Don mentioned, meditating, my morning does not start without me sitting and reading from my daily words. My mom started me reading daily words when I was a girl. It's been a long time since I've been a girl. And so I read from those passages every morning as part of my meditation. And then I ask myself the simple question, and I want you guys, so Cynthia, this is where you begin. So starting tomorrow morning, I want you to take a few minutes and just ask yourself, where is my heart this morning? Where is my heart? Because I believe what you say, what we say, flows from what's in our hearts. So if you can tap into your heart and just feel what's going on there, you can then make decisions about how you want your day to flow. And when it isn't flowing the way you think it should be, you have the power to say, stop, reframe, and then move again. So that's your task, and you better call me next week and tell me you started to practice that.
Dr. Urban, I totally appreciate that. And if I have to be the person on this panel who, states that I am working on self-care, I'm very happy to be that person, because I don't think, and I hope this is not controversial, but I don't think that Black women believe or are taught that we can have self-care. It's not a part of our, to my knowledge, a part of our lineage in this country. Okay, and so it is almost a revolutionary act to say, I'm going to sit down each morning and I'm going to write, where is my heart this morning, and let that lead me. All those kinds of things, those are wonderful. Those are wonderful things. And I really want Black women to understand that, including myself, that it is okay. It literally is a revolutionary act to say, I'm going to just stop for a moment, and the world will keep turning. It
and
really
the world will. And I think maybe Don will plan this one for next year, but that's a whole discussion right there. Black women feeling like we have to carry the world, because that's what we have been taught. We're responsible for everyone.
Yeah,
well,
Dr. Irvin, I think it's because we've been doing it, and we've passed that down generation to generation, that you feel that way because that's what you're doing and that's what you've been doing.
But
So
maybe you need to add to it, which is giving yourself permission to stop and take a break. It doesn't mean you give it all up, but you have the right to stop and breathe.
That's right. I love it. I cannot wait to hear what Dr. Ms. Siobhan Arline Bradley has to say. And I know she's going to come at us from a place of making sure we include gratitude in our place of self-care, because things.
Absolutely. I think it may not be in our DNA to abide by self-care, but it is in our DNA to survive. And so survival mechanisms for Black women vary. For some, it is your survival has been your faith, right? Your ability to yield and submit. For some Black women, though, it has been what we modeled. We have modeled what we've seen. Black mothers over generations have always done something. They've worked, they have cooked, they take care of families, they've built businesses. This is our lineage. And so this idea, and I don't think it's controversial at all, Dr. Bryant. I think the context is we model what we see, and we cannot model what we don't see. And I think that the other piece for us beyond this conversation around our faith is also a relationship with yourself. I had to figure out that I like me. I had to get to the place where me was great to be with. I'm an massive extrovert who loves people, who has a company, who was preaching, who was constantly doing things. And what was difficult for me was to be by myself. That was actually difficult for me because there was no stimulus. And I had to learn that the stimulation is connecting to my gratitude for what God has already blessed me with. I mean, how many women can say they can get up and go to whatever spa they want? I mean, we are privileged We are privileged to be able to have access that many of our sisters do not have. And so it's imperative for us to be able to start thinking about what it means to be someone in powerful position who still needs healing, who still needs support. And we do not always equate powerful women with need. We always think that powerful women are just going to be powerful. What we don't know is story. We just see glory. Constant story behind that, though, right? There's constant internal strife. There's stress, there's pressure, there's obligations, there's expectations. And so, yes, there's gratitude, but there's also gratitude to just start to stop. I call it start and then stop. When you start and stop, that means you start realizing, wow, I have this list of life. I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, I'm a Black woman, I'm a faith giver, I'm a healer, I'm a wife, I'm a banker, I'm a chauffeur, all these things that Black women do. When you start realizing that, you do have to take a pause. And then in your assessment, identify what is the thing that brings me joy? And then what is the thing that then advances the wellness of my people? That is what drives me. My joy is, yes, I go to a spa every 6 weeks. Dr. Irvin, I'm with you. I'm in that spot. I let that woman rub on me all day long, okay? But the other part is I do get a euphoric response when I see Black people prosper, when I see young people do well, when I see systems change. That actually encourages me. And we talk about this, how our body responds to positive engagement. When they say you smile, that's an endorphin that comes out in your body. These are hormones that we need. We need happiness, we need laughter. Some of it is also a phone call. Dr. Merrick, you talked about this. We do not utilize our social skills to get our healing. There is nothing like your girlfriends that you can just scream and holler with. There is nothing like your sorority sisters or your church members or your whoever. And it's not always your spouse. Sometimes you've got to step out and tap into your sisterhood thing. My husband's amazing. I love my husband, but he's not my girlfriend. And so there's some things that sister girls can do and say that you need for your wellness. And I think the young people really are the best model for this, because I love watching the joy and the innocence of young people. And Latavia, I'm so excited to hear about you as a young person who loves God, but also knows how to lead and love. So there is gratitude, but there's also clarity on the need for those that are doing all the work to understand that we have healing needs and we need to actually honor them.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you, Dr. Irvin. Thank you, Miss Arlen Bradley, for the word that you've given us. And Dr. Irvin, you gave us a quick and free session on counseling. I just want everybody to note that these kinds of things can cost. And so she gave us some really good tips there from a professional standpoint. And then just everything that we've heard so far. And we do have a question in the chat box. E. Hughes, we see your question about exercising. Is this a good outlet for self-care? I would vote yes. Taking a walk in nature works better for me than a walk on the treadmill, but if the treadmill is all I can get, then we'll do that. Any other thoughts from our panelists on how exercise fits into self-care?
Absolutely. I was a former athlete and exercise physiology major. This is the work that we've always done. I will say this, Black women have more access to wellness than they know. It is utilizing music. Music makes you move. So if you're in your home and you can just start dancing, you can use your chair for an exercise opportunity where you can do arm strength. You can use food cans in your house. You can use jugs of water and water bottles. These can all be a part of your routine because every neighborhood is not conducive for walking. I don't want to make that assumption. Right. We at times assume that everyone's community is safe and has safe sidewalks to be able to utilize. Your home, the steps to even go into your door. There's nothing like doing a step-up workout right outside of your front door. And I think the other thing is breathing exercises. That's a part of exercising, stretching, any kind of resistance training. When I say resistance training, I mean sitting in your chair, standing up, doing squats, doing stretches. Anything over your head helps your heart rate go up. So arm presses, things like that, allow your body to get moving. So I'm excited about that question. It doesn't take a gym to be well.
I love it. And I think we started something, Dean Kite. This Women's History event is going to evolve to a workout group, perhaps a group that will go and have a massage, because I think afterwards we're going to start to tap into who these masseuses are that y'all are going to make sure we've got some good ones in our list. I think that's going to be important. I would love to see us do that. And I'm going to be honest with you, every time I hear the Southern University Marching Band, I cannot help but move. I don't care what function I'm in. I oftentimes forget that I'm not a student, and I will start hopping like, and I'm like, okay, let me calm down. I'm not still in college, but the band brings that out in us. And I want to go back to something that both Dawn and Valerie mentioned. You all both said that your mother told you something, and Valerie, you watched your mother. And we talked about this being in our DNA and coming through the years of what we've seen, what we've been taught specifically, and just what's in us. And I want all of us to take a moment, all of our panelists to take a moment and share with us a thought from your mother that you are still carrying with you now. And many of us, our mothers are no longer with us. And so it's, but the word is still there. The message is still there. It's as if they are still here telling us, you know, exactly what to do. And those of you whose mothers are still with you, enjoy that and get as much as you can from them, I would say. And I'm going to start with you, Ms. Roberts. What is it, something that your mother has shared with you 7 hours away that you told us that you hear even while you're here at Southern?
So me and my mom, we talk every day. I do not go through it without talking to my mom at least every day, because I know that, you know, it can be hard on her end. Her baby girl, 7 hours away. In the beginning, she did not want me to come this far, but I'm about to graduate and I'll be the first to graduate in my family. So I'm sure she's glad that she didn't help me back. But honestly and truly, looking at my mom, you know, looking at my mom, my grandma, my great-grand, you know, all those generations, like you all were saying, we're so used to seeing people just work, but not have nothing to give back for themselves and take that time to themselves. Because if you, like Dr. Irvin was saying, once you are giving out so much, you rarely have more to yourself. And looking at my mom and her mom and my grandma and all of those people in my family, I want to change that. And I see, you know, the passion and the purpose behind all of that working. But what I want to instill within my organization, within my peers, is that yes, it's good to work, but it's not good to work yourself till you're tired, work yourself until you're not able to have those fun moments. So my mom, she does instill a lot of wisdom into me and instill a lot of, you know, gems that I could use in college. But everything that my mom says, I take it like a grain of salt. But I'm like, okay, Mom, yes, that's the way that you went and did it, but I wanted something better. I want something different. So I'm glad that my mom is very open and she's willing to support me with whatever I'm doing. And she's just a great person. So that's all.
Oh, that's awesome. And I tell you, the older you get, the more you're going to realize how smart your mother was or is. You're going to realize that everything they said is indeed coming to pass. Although the times have changed, a lot hasn't really changed in terms of human nature and people. And so, Dr. Irvin, you said it earlier, the things that you watched your mom do, but tell us something that that's definitely still with you from your mom.
Well, 2 words that when I was a girl, I would tease her about walking around the house, talking to herself or talking to God. And one day I asked her, I said, do you expect him to answer you? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. And so we continued to have a conversation. And she said to me, Jean, at some point, she said, keep living. That was a little phrase she would use. At some point, you will understand, but God. I don't know how many times I've had experiences where I have said, but God.
But God, I love
But
it.
God. Yeah.
I love it. Dean Kite, you started this when you said
I
things.
know, look, and I'm laughing because my mother has so many phrases. And my sister is on the line also. I know she could share a few. Some I couldn't really say right on the line, but
We understand those too.
yes, but the one Dr. Irvin said, definitely keep living. But my mother, as she grew, she was definitely into the church and into her faith, and she imparted that into both of us so much. So one saying that she always said, and that it's not original because it came from the Bible, but it is trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Get wisdom. That's what she said. Get wisdom.
I love it. I love it. And Dr. Bryant had to step off to another meeting. I don't think she's back yet. So I'll present that question to you, Ms. Siobhan.
Two words she used: keep serving.
Mm,
She never. She's here with me today, actually. And the word she would say, just keep serving. And it was in the context of serving God and serving your people. Jesus and justice were in alignment in our home. And so those were two entities that were never separated. And so in ministry and in life, it's been about ensuring that you're pleasing God, but ensuring that your people are well. Keep serving, don't stop. And so in that, finding opportunity for self-care may be difficult, but when you serve, he will bless you. And I have seen God move in that way. And so I encourage you all to keep serving. God's reputation is always on the line. And it shows up in the way that you gain access to the things that you never thought you'd see. And shout out to our future graduate. Keep serving, because God has already shown you are going to be the first but not the last in your family. It's because of the seed of service. So that's from my mom.
yes, indeed, indeed. And our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers and all the women in our families are certainly it is certainly befitting to honor them this Women's History Month, because they truly were the epitome of hope and healing. As we look back, they gave us hope just by their everyday existence, especially if we look back on it. And of course, the healing, it was just, it's innate. You get a scrape on your knee and the first person you run into is your mother to help you with that boo-boo or whatever the problem is. Your mom is there to comfort you and to help heal you. So I thank you, Dean Cade, for taking us down that road. It wasn't on our script, but I think this whole session has been divinely ordered, and we needed to stop and take a moment to honor the Black women. For all of us, I say Black women as our panelists, but certainly to honor the women in our lives that have brought us to this place. All of us were birthed by a woman, and our mothers, our grandmothers, and so forth, to certainly honor. So we're going to close here. We're going to ask, I don't see any more questions in the chat box, but I would ask just closing comments from each of our panelists as we close out today's conversation. We said we were going to be here a little bit over an hour, and that's kind of where we are right now. So we'll start, we will start with you, Dean Cade, to start our closing comments.
Sure. Again, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I think it has been a very healthy conversation and discussion. Thank you, Dr. Merritt, as always, for leading this. You always do such an excellent job. But I want to close by saying, esteemed the library, we're always promoting resources. And we want to make sure that our communities have accurate and relevant information. I think Dean Bryant talked about all of the misinformation that's out there, but we promote reliable resources. And in the area of health literacy, several of our librarians just recently worked on a grant with Dr. Taylor, where we promoted health literacy. So there's a guide that's available. I don't know if Melita Payne is on the line, but if she could drop that link in the chat, I would appreciate that. That helps us to locate resources. There are a plethora of databases that are available, and not only the university's library, but the public library has so much information out there. And when we make decisions concerning our health and any part of our life, we want to make sure we are using reliable information and reliable resources. And we want to make sure our communities have access to that information. So I'm pushing digital literacy, digital equity, inclusion, and all of that involves making sure we have access to the technology and access to the resources that leads us to make informed decisions. So that's my closing. Please access it. If Melita hasn't dropped that link in the chat, we'll make sure that you gain access to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Cade. And Miss Melita, if you're listening, please drop that link in the chat. And I think we may be able to capture the chat such that we can maybe reach out to everyone if we don't get it in the chat box before we close out. Oh, there it is. Thank you. Access to health literacy. The link is in the chat, so please copy that and visit that site. Dr. Irving, closing comments?
Yes, thank you both to you, Dr. Merrick, and to Dean Kite for the invitation, and to everyone who joined us this afternoon. I too agree that it's been a very helpful and healing presentation here. I would like you to walk away with one thought, which is as we continue to move through this pandemic, remember those people who have lost people. That, you know, grief and loss, of course, is a part of living, but it affects everyone differently. And you don't know the tiny little thing you can say to someone on any given day that could really be the healing that person needs. And so I'll leave you with one of the 4 agreements from one of my favorite writers. And that agreement is be impeccable with your word. Always think before you speak, and be intentional with what you are delivering to the other person.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Siobhan.
My takeaway really today is to remember who you are. I think that a lot of times we go through life coasting with all the work that we have to do, and we don't really realize the power that we actually have. There's so much power on this line. We are powerful leaders. We are powerful in our professions, in our personal lives. And if we would actualize the power we really have, I do think that life would change for many of us. We would have more access, we'd have more downtime because we'll be in control of what's around us. And one more thing I want to say is don't accept mediocrity. It is not an option for us. We are a people who come from an ancestry of resilience. And if you can be reared from women who were able to birth children and pick cotton the next day, you are now women who have PhDs, who are about to graduate. Mediocrity is not an option, which is why we have a Black woman in the White House, which is why we have a Black woman who's about to be a Supreme Court justice, which is why we have our organizations. This is why we do well. It's because we come from an ancestry of leadership. So don't accept anything but that which is yours. Understand your power, know what it is when you walk into a room, and never diminish your light, because your light will change the darkness all around you.
I love it. And what you said earlier, I just wrote it down. You said, I like me. I don't know if y'all can see that, it's blurred, but I wrote it down. I like me. Yes, you said that earlier. You got to start there. I like me, and then go from there. But thank you for that. And I did deliberately want to close with our student, not just because you're the youngest, not just because you're a student, but you really represent our future. And all of us are looking to you to really embody all the things that we've shared, all that we're trying to pour into our students. And then you're going to be the what's next that we see. So Ms. Roberts, the floor is yours.
Yes, Dr. Merrick, there were so many takeaways that I could talk about, but if I could put it into a brief phrase, I would just say